All right, Jossie. So here we go. We have a big, I think, fly larvae. Mm, this is the horse manure, by the way. It's very difficult to tell. You can see it's trapped in a little air bubble underneath, and you see that just where its legs are. Um, Again, it's not really transparent enough for me to have any idea what it is. It looks like it's two very large eyes, though. It's got some pretty fierce-looking claws on the end of its legs. Um, and yeah, a really kind of fat abdomen. I'm going to have a look down the microscope so all the focus will change for you. Yeah, the details are actually quite a bit better on the microscope, but I have no idea what that is. Let's zoom into 100 times and see if we can get an ID on this guy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to send this off again to an entomologist. Could send it to my dad actually. Maybe he would have some sort of idea. Yeah, two really bulbous looking eyes, which makes me think it's some sort of fly larvae, possibly. The legs are confusing me a bit though. Um, anyway, quite a cool little find. So I'm just going to zoom out again. You know it's all about the zooming. So, and it's very, very small that actually. See if we zoom like right in, can actually get a sort of sense of scale for you. Let's compare it to something that we know the size of. Yeah. So there you go. It's its eyes and its little button nose. I don't know how well you can see it if we go here, but yeah, it becomes significantly more transparent. There you go. You can see its legs really well. And I think it's it's definitely upside down. So let's find a little bacterium. So that's a little bacterium that you can see gyrating just beside its right eyeball. So yes, it's pretty tiny, but absolutely gigantic by comparison to anything else. So, I mean, I can't even see it on the cover slip, so it's very, very small. Okay, so we'll leave that guy to his fate. I'll fire him back in the manure when we're done. So yeah, like I say, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. I'm not sure what indicators there would be. Basically, like the papers that I read said that there is definitely an impact on microbial life, and it's certainly not a selective impact either. It seems to have a sort of broad spectrum of species that it affects. And that seems to be true of all the sides, the herbicide, the muscicide, the fungicide, etc. They certainly have a more widespread effect than it would say on the label. That's absolutely true. Mainly because people just haven't really been looking at soil microorganisms. Oh, there's a nematode there. And how can you possibly study every species and see what effect your chemical has? There's just it's not realistic that a company's ever going to do that. So I got a nematode, so that's cool. I'm just gonna do the old zooming in, and here we go. 6 times 100. And we should be able to, because it's moving quite slowly, this is 100 magnification, we should be able to identify what variety it is. There being like 4 main types of nematodes. There's fungal feeding nematodes, there's bacterial feeding nematodes, there's root feeding nematodes, which are the ones that, of course, farmers are really concerned about and cause all the root damage. And there's predatory nematodes. Predatory nematodes are interesting actually because they seem to have a preference for attacking root feeding nematodes. So it's nature's little check, basically. It seems. So this is nice. And then let's just zoom in. The way that we identify nematodes like this, they're normally a lot more active, and they can be really quite wriggly, and very hard to ID because they never stay still. But this guy seems pretty lethargic. As we look at their mouth parts here, and you're not going to be able to tell, but once I look through a microscope I will be able to tell. We look at their mouth parts primarily, and we also look down their length right up to where their intestine begins, basically. And we look for these things called bulbs, basically. So we have a terminal bulb and a medium bulb. And I don't know what these are exactly. I assume they're sort of, holding sites for food. But you can see that it has two bulbs. I don't know if you can make those two outlines out. So it has its mouth at this end, then it runs into an esophagus, and then there's a little bulb there, which is like peristaltic kind of musculature, and then there's a little gap, and then there's a terminal bulb there just before it reaches the intestine. The intestine, you'll note, is full of bacterium. So we will say that this is probably a bacterial feeder. Bacterial feeders are pretty common, and they can often be identified if anything's got like a fancy ornamentation around its lips, which you can just, I don't know if you can just about make that out. Then that is 100% a bacterial feeder. So I'm just going to have a look down the microscope, and focus again is going to change for you. So yeah, I believe that's a bacterial feeder. It's got a cylindrical shaped opening to its mouth. And I think I can just about make out some little lips at the end there. It doesn't have a very sharp sort of spear. It doesn't have an incredibly muscular body. And it doesn't seem to have a small spear either, so those are all the indicators of the other species of nematode. So that's quite cool. And that's a good indicator. I believe this is actually a fungal spore. I believe so. It's actually a sort of ascus. It's like a fungal sac with all the spores inside it, like a sporangium. So that's quite cool. It would be really nice to know what species are particularly sensitive to aminoparalids, because then, if we see large quantities of these species present, then we would have an indicator of whether it's present or not. Fungal spore in the centre, dead centre. The lemon thing on the left hand side is another fungal spore. I'm just going to go back and scan again, because that's a quick way to just get an overview of the sample. So let's have a look here. I'm going to get out of this room quite quickly because it's 30 degrees in this room, which is a bit upsetting. So it's an insect leg there. You can probably make that out. You can imagine it sort of looking like it would sit on a mosquito or a fly or something. So that's what that is. Lots of insect legs. Look at all these. It's an insect graveyard. This thing is that. Very little fungi again, I'm afraid. Fungal spores though. But you'd think with all this straw, there would probably be maybe a little bit more of a fungal population. This might be a hyphae here, possibly. So we'll zoom in, but my camera is doing its thing, so just 2 seconds.